Okay. Are you ready? Yep.
35 prisoners were released from Barlinnie prison this morning, but only one left in a limousine.
Duncan spoke about the letters he's had when he was in prison, and that created a bond between Duncan and Everton.
It's not just words. I love them, and I'll always love them.
It's the story which has gripped Merseyside. Walter Smith's future on the line. The Everton boss apparently close to quitting over the multi-million-pound sale of captain Duncan Ferguson to Newcastle.
We were under pressure from the bank to get the overdraft down.
It upset me. You try to move on. It's not easy for me. I couldn't rub off my tattoo, could I?
The fans adore him. Then all of a sudden, a crash bang wallop, he's playing with the striped shirt on.
A fan had came into the training ground, burst into reception, sat herself on a seat and refused to move until Duncan Ferguson was re-signed.
It was a bit of shock. Once your club doesn't want you, really it's inevitable you've got to move, haven't you?
What's signing for Rangers, Duncan?
It's brilliant.
Just look for you. Duncan.
I knew that when I signed for Rangers, that was explained to me that really it probably was a year too early for me, but because I was wanting to move away from Dundee United, Walter decided to sign me probably a year too early. He wanted to sign me really a year later. It was a bit early for me to break in.
Probably the best kid in Scotland at the time now. He broke into Dundee United team very early, established himself. The Walter was building for the future and building a team, and Duncan was the ideal the prospect to get.
I mean, they were the best in the country. Two great strikers, Mark, big target man, and Ali, you know, the smaller guy picking up the second ball and scoring all the goals. I mean, Mark chipped him a hell of a lot of goals as well. So it was very difficult for me to break into the team.
The arrival of Duncan was a spur Mark needed. For the next 2 or 3 seasons, Mark and Coisty now were basically unplayable in Scotland. It gave Mark a boost to know now that maybe somebody was going to be challenging him, but certainly now Duncan found himself restricted in playing the position he wanted to play, and he found himself now playing different positions, wide and the right, wide and the left, which didn't really suit him.
It didn't quite work out for me. Injuries as well played a part, which played a part really through my career. Nothing was inevitable, but you know, in the back of your mind you're thinking you maybe have to move on, you know. See myself as a quiet guy, never went looking for confrontation at all. Of course there's another little bit of side to me, wasn't there, off the field as well. Just as long as you don't break into my house, you're all right.
You nervous, Duncan? What do you think about the prospect of moving to it?
When the incident just happened, I didn't think anything was going to happen, but of course then I heard the noise after again. So I knew something was up then. They obviously knew I was on probation, and if I got another offence against me, there was a chance of me going to prison.
Duncan being Duncan just got on with it.
Well, we were struggling at the time. Mike Walker was the manager. We were looking to get hold of 1 or 2 players. We heard that Trevor Stephen was leaving Rangers. Of course, Trevor was with us in the 80s through brilliant years. So we arranged to go up to see David Murray at Rangers. He said, if you want to talk to Trevor, he's actually doing laps around the track. He said, then you can go and chat to him and then come back here. So Peter Johnson and I, owner chairman at the time, he and I went down to see Trevor, had a chat with him, said we'd like to take you back to Goodison. He said there's nothing I would love more. He said, but really you don't want me. I am knackered. Went back to David Murray's office and I said to him, how are you getting on with the Duncan Ferguson story? Tell us what's going on. He said he's getting, every time he plays away, he's getting booed. He's getting booed at home by the away supporters. He's not really playing. So I suggested that he might come to us for 3 months loan while all this was blowing over. So David Murray said, yeah, well, we'll have to talk to Walter Smith, see what Walter thinks about it. So Walter came along about half an hour later and thought it was a great idea. He said, it's a worry for me, but get him out of the way for 3 months would be brilliant.
There was a lot happening in my career, in my life at the time. I spoke to Walter, he thought it was the right thing for me. I think it was time for me to move on for Rangers and you know, get out of Scotland. So a fresh start was what was needed.
Dunk came back in his training gear and it was put to him and his words were, I'll get you up the table, Chairman.
They were used to the big number 9s, weren't they? And Scottish ones. You know, the Andy Grays, Graham Sharps, you know, Alec Youngs, you know, the Golden Vision. I followed in their footsteps, really.
There was no hesitation at all. He was delighted at the thought of coming to Goodison. Then it transpired that Walter didn't really want him to go on his own. He said, I'd like somebody to go with him. He said, why don't you take Ian Durant? So we agreed to take Ian Durant for a month.
I was just maybe a babysitter for the first month. We were in a hotel and I asked Big Dunky to get some basic stuff, chicken, pasta, some sausages, maybe a bit of bread and milk. And Big Dunky came back with 15 pot noodles. The ultimate diet for a football player.
Swapping the blue of Glasgow for the blue of Merseyside. Ian Durant and Duncan Ferguson are the men Everton hope can lift them off the bottom of the Premiership.
I wouldn't say it'd be a relief to get away from Scotland, no, but a new challenge. I think the position Everton at the moment is maybe a false position, and if we can in some way help them to get up the league, then that's all the better.
They were delighted to have them aboard, and obviously it gives competition for places, which is what I've said I've always wanted.
I remember when Duncan walked in wearing a red jacket, and you can imagine the reaction that got on Merseyside.
It was orange, it just looked red, I think. But believe me, it was orange. It was an orange jacket.
I'll tell you right now, it was a Kevin Keegan red. I swear to God, he was like Emily Hughes walked into a Goodison press conference. So we're behind the black ball right away, because the next day in the paper they were slaughtering us, honestly.
I thought that jacket was lovely, by the way. I don't think Liverpool was ready for it.
It was a strange press conference because obviously Ian Durant was the much more experienced player and Duncan was quite young and didn't really want to talk to the media. But of course he was the story because of what was about to come. I think Peter and Cliff Finch, they were very much about making a noise, you know, and there was a lot of noise around Everton at that point. So I think they were getting what they wanted really, in the fact that people were talking about Everton, which they hadn't done before.
I probably struggled the first few games under Mike Walker. I think the team was struggling really.
We had already decided that Mike was not for us.
And then Big Joe came in, didn't he, and lifted the whole place.
Was it hard to manage, Duncan?
No. I just used to say, yes, Duncan, whatever you want, Duncan.
Big Joe knows what a centre-forward's all about.
Joe would have appreciated the fact that Duncan was coming in and he was a big, raw, bustling centre-forward.
I think Joe saw a little bit of himself in Duncan. He gave Duncan the licence to go out and do what he's best at and terrorise defences.
He was outstanding. You know, people don't realise that they talk about how brilliant he was in the air, and he was brilliant in the air. He was also lightning quick. You know, he could run away from people. He certainly was an athlete as well, and he was a hard man as well. You know, nobody messed with Duncan.
It was a big night, wasn't it? That was the first time I'd scored for Everton, and to score against all enemy, you know, people don't forget it, do they?
I think Everton were looking for a hero. There's no better way to announce yourself than scoring in a derby. That sort of cemented the bond straight away, and he then became an emblem for the team and somebody the fans could relate to and look up to.
If you score against Liverpool as an Everton player, you're pretty much sorted for the rest of your life.
Duncan coming into the club, he was a great impact on the players because of his character, not just his footballing ability. You know, around the dressing room, you get the best out of players as well.
From there on, a legend. It was quite incredible the way the crowd took to him. Bringing Duncan in was just a stroke of luck, really, that he was available and Rangers let him come to us.
Realistically, at the end of that month, we've got to have him. Fair enough to Peter Johnson, you know, he backed me on that. But it was a given. He was already the fans' favourite.
When his tenure was up, his 3 months, we contacted David and said, you know, he's very happy here, we'd like to buy him. Didn't take much persuading. I think we paid $4 million for him.
It didn't take me long to fall in love with the city and the club. So, you know, once I'd come to Everton, I didn't want to go back, to be honest. Yeah, I was happy where I was.
Duncan Ferguson was convicted earlier this month. The sheriff said in the light of Ferguson's 3 previous convictions, he had no choice but to jail him, both in the public interest and to bring home to the 23-year-old that such behaviour could not be tolerated.
I think it was an injustice. I don't think I should have been put in prison. I think I should have done a community service at least, but there you go, it is what it is.
We honestly didn't think that anybody was going to go to jail for something that happened on a football pitch a year ago, but apparently the Procurator Fiscal of Scotland wanted to make an example of someone because of what was going on the pitch, not just with Duncan but with other players. And that's what we heard anyway. Whether it's true or not, I don't know.
Duncan spoke about the letters he's had when he was in prison and how much that supported him and how much it helped him during his time in Barlinnie. That created a bond between Duncan and Everton, which still remains today. I always remember Peter Johnson and Cliff Finch driving up to Barlinnie to visit him. You know, Everton are like that as a club. They very much support their own. Joe Royle then eventually went up as well.
We said to him we'd like to go and visit Duncan in Barlinnie, show him a bit of support. And they got the message back, no, Duncan doesn't want to see anybody, he doesn't want to see anybody. So we just said, well, we're going to go anyway. So we went.
It was a nice touch, wasn't it? But they were brave. The waiting room, it's not a nice place to be in. It's not a nice place to be in the prison either.
He was absolutely delighted to see us. And we went in the prison, and it was quite an experience actually, especially in the waiting room. Oh my God. You visit there and you think, I'm going to be very careful because I don't want to end up in a place like this, my God.
But it was lovely to see them. They stuck by me, didn't they? Great men, great people. Really appreciative to have saw them at that time. It was a low part of my life.
35 prisoners were released from Barlinnie prison this morning, but only one left in a limousine. Sentenced last month to 3 months, Ferguson served 44 days behind bars.
I think he'll come out of it very positive. I'm sure he'll be looking forward to getting back on the pitch.
Duncan's one of the nicest fellas I've ever met. You know, and if you read the media, you think he's a thug. If you know him personally, he's an angel, really. He's a big, soft kid, and we're glad to have him back, and we hope to protect him a bit better than what he has been.
He's delighted. I mean, when you train all week and there's nothing at the end of it, you know, you get a bit down, but he's got something to look forward to now.
Did he come out cock-a-hoop, score a couple of goals?
He didn't score a couple of goals.
You were marking him, were you?
Don't get silly, like. It was a bit of a laugh and that, you know. You had your porridge this morning, Duncan, and all that, you know. Yeah, everyone used to chip in, you couldn't hide, but he loved it. He bounced back with something else. He was as sharp as anything, Duncan.
Players coming to the club will realise the size of the club once they get here and play out there, you know. It can be a difficult environment, you've got to be strong. I certainly put myself in the category that was strong and I could handle it.
That's what he gave to Everton. He gave that, we will fight no matter what. He gave them hope, he gave them spirit. You know, he took them along with him. When he run down the pitch with his fist in the air, they were right behind him.
Well, Evertonians are getting restless. Their team can't score goals and they need a win. The prospect of another long struggle against relegation is already looming. And Ruud Gullit isn't happy at the way things are mapping out at Newcastle either. They're just as desperate for points. So a real crunch match this.
There was some whisperings in the press, but there was no indication whatsoever of the imminent nature of what was going to happen that night.
It happened very quickly. I think I only got told maybe a couple of days leading up to the Newcastle game that the agent was phoning me saying that the club were looking to sell you. Yeah, it came out the blue really. Something I wasn't looking to do, I wasn't looking to move. Didn't want to move for the club.
We were under pressure from the bank to get the overdraft down. We were playing Newcastle and the chairman and joint owner were there and I wasn't there, I wasn't privy. It was news to me when it came through. Newcastle had come in with an £8 million offer. And Peter accepted it.
There were murmurs as the night progressed, and then it sort of reached the crescendo around the half an hour of the game mark, and I was getting bombarded by the press. You know, Duncan's going to Newcastle, Duncan's going to Newcastle. There was a group of fans appeared outside the stadium at the reception door.
A lot of us were in Spain covering Celta Vigo for Liverpool, which was taking place on the Tuesday. The Everton-Newcastle game was the Monday night. We started getting message that Duncan Ferguson was leaving.
I saw Michael Dunford, who was the Everton secretary at the time, you know, and in those days the secretary did all the signings and the transfers. And so I said to him, Michael, the press are going mad. They're saying Duncan Ferguson is leaving. And he said, rubbish. So I said, really? So he says, rubbish. So I said, okay. So off I went upstairs to the press room and I proclaimed in front of 40, 50 press guys. Absolute rubbish.
Well, I'm sure they would have loved to have had him out there, Duncan Ferguson, because he's their leading scorer this season with 5 goals.
I was actually in one of these boxes here. I think it was in one next door. I got called up to speak to them after the game. That was the first meeting I'd had with him.
I walked back down the stairs, and halfway down the stairs, on one of the floors there by one of the lounges, there's a little chairman's office which he just uses on match days. And the door was ajar slightly, and I thought, that shouldn't be like that on a match day, you know, because obviously any fans could walk into it. So I thought, I'll just close the door, I'll just put my head round, see if there's anyone in there. So I put my head round the door, and there's Ruud Gullit, Duncan Ferguson and his agent, and they're signing the contract.
It got explained to me really in the end that the club were struggling for a wee bit of money. I was the asset and they wanted to sell. That was the story I got told anyway. They got the £8 million for me.
You've got to remember also, Duncan had gone through a lot of the time with this hernia injury that was recurring all the time, and he didn't play anywhere near the number of games you would expect for your lead striker. You can understand Peter's thinking behind it.
It's the final whistle, and it's relief all round at Goodison Park.
Very frustrating because you sit down on the bench and you think like, nah, we're never going to score a goal, never. We need some power up front. We know that. We hope that it's going to happen very quickly.
He was a better player than most people thought he was. Of course, he was tough, but that is what I needed up front. I needed to have somebody who could hold the ball and keep the ball and also animated the team. So therefore I needed Duncan.
Next minute, Duncan came down with his agent. They came out the door and there was a car waiting for him across the road.
Dunk's father was in the Winslow across the road, and apparently walked in there and said, they've sold my son to Newcastle, and all hell was let loose.
He got in this car and off he went, and there were people jumping on the back of the car, there were people screaming, don't go, Duncan, you know, it was crazy. I followed the chairman into his Rolls Royce up to Oxton where he lived at the time, and he looked at me and he said, what do you think? I said, well, this is bad, chairman, you know, fans are going crazy, you know, it's not good. And he looked at me and he put his hands to his mouth and he said, I don't care, I'll be in Jersey in an hour. And that was the last we saw of Peter Johnson.
It's the story which has gripped Merseyside. Walter Smith's future on the line. The Everton boss apparently close to quitting over the multi-million-pound sale of captain Duncan Ferguson to Newcastle.
Well, I think any manager would have to consider his position after that's happened. But there was a board meeting this morning and quite a few things were cleared up, so I'm still Everton manager and will remain Everton manager. In fairness, we have spent a fair amount of money, and that was one of the reasons that I had to take into account. And I was spent a fair amount of money, and I don't think it was right for me to turn my back in that situation.
I think Walter knew little about it, if any. He was in the dark as well.
Was he against you going, Walter?
I think he was, yeah, to begin with, yeah. But a few conversations, as you can imagine.
It's not true to say that it was a complete surprise to Walter Smith. Beginning of that season, we did a pre-season in Holland and Belgium. Archie Knox, Walter Smith, Peter Johnson, myself was sitting outside. Peter asked Walter, have you got a list for me of who you want, who you don't want? Well, yeah, Archie and I have drawn up a list of players we don't want. And he put a list of 10 players on the table. And the top of that list was Duncan Ferguson.
I think it was more of a surprise to a lot of people. I think it was a bit quiet behind the scenes, and it sort of just happened, and you were just told that Duncan he's left.
Yeah, and I went up to Newcastle I think the next day. And it took 2 or 3 days to get the contract sorted out. And we signed for Newcastle, a wonderful club, great club. But I wasn't even looking to make the move.
Duncan Ferguson became Ruud Gullit's first major signing since taking over at Newcastle. The 26-year-old put his name to a 5-year deal, but said he was surprised that Everton had wanted to sell.
I was surprised at the time that let me go, considering the position they're in the league. That's their agenda. If they're looking to sell and if that's going to benefit their club, then that's up to them.
I'm very pleased. I think he's the right player for us. We needed some reinforcement up front, that was obvious. And we did the deal very, very quickly.
I think I'd rather have Dunks in our side than playing against us. I think it's a fantastic signing, and if the both of us can play together, which I'm sure we can, then we should be all right.
Alan Shearer is a finisher, I don't want him to get the first ball. I wanted Duncan to have the first ball, the first pass, hold it, give it to the midfielders, and then try to find somebody, you know, who could do the crosses, and that's Alan Shearer.
Obviously, everybody knows Alan Shearer's one of the best players in Europe, and I'm looking forward to teaming up with him. I think it'll be a good partnership.
We got back into Liverpool in the early hours of Wednesday morning, and I think the press conference was around 9:30 up in Newcastle. I remember getting there just in time and sort of taking my place in the rows, and Duncan came walking through the middle. I'd written my number down on a piece of paper and just said to him as he walked through, "Can I speak to you? Can you ring me?" I was on the M6 and the phone went, and obviously didn't recognise the number. You pull over and spoke to him for probably about 15 minutes. I think he knew it was an opportunity to get a message across, so the article sort of touched on his sort of affection for the fans and how they'd helped him through the time when he was at Barlini.
It upset me. You try to move on. It's not easy for me. You know, I couldn't rub off my tattoo, could I?
He did a competition in the Evertonian magazine for the fans to design the tattoo. You know, he showed everybody when he scored in one of the Merseyside derbies.
I was settled here. My wife was here, you know, the family. My daughter was just a couple of months old. It was a bit of a shock. Once your club doesn't want you as such, you know, really it's inevitable, you've got to move on there.
He's become a fan's favourite, the fans adore him. He had everything ready for him at Goodison, then all of a sudden a crash bang wallop, and he's playing with the striped shirt on.
A fan who came into the training ground, burst into reception, sat herself on a seat and refused to move until Duncan Ferguson was re-signed. And I said, listen, you're going to be there for 3 years because he signed a 3-year contract, you know. So we ended up having I went sent out for 2 cakes from the local Sayers, and we ended up having a cup of tea and a cake, and she eventually realised, you know, what the situation was, and she went off home.
It's a difficult time for the fans. I think they were struggling as well. So obviously me being the striker, you know, obviously it was difficult times for Everton, because how do you get the replacement?
There was a lot of sort of animosity to how the club was being run. So you've just come off a relegation battle then to sell the player who was the hero for the fans. Peter Johnson would have realised that was the end then for him in terms of his ownership of the club.
It was manager Walter Smith who was reportedly ready to quit over the sale of Duncan Ferguson. But in the end, it's chairman Peter Johnson who's resigned.
Well, there's no question that selling Duncan was the catalyst for Peter to get out of the club. He had to have police protection. He had threats against his daughters, which is quite despicable, really. You know, I don't care what happens on a football pitch or in a football club. And one day Peter said to me, I've had enough, I'm getting out.
The return of one of Merseyside's adopted sons. The on-off on a game transfer of Duncan Ferguson finally completed.
If I can prove my fitness and play a quiet amount of matches every season, I'm sure Everton will get their value.
Bill Kenwright had been given the opportunity to bring Duncan back, and he loved theatre. And bringing Duncan Ferguson back to Goodison Park was theatre in his eyes. He'd not had a massively successful time at Newcastle, but he'd scored some great goals, and he was still the player that everybody thought he was. And I remember coming out into the car park, and there was fans everywhere, you know, wanting to welcome Duncan back. Someone gave me a baby to give him to hold, and you know, it was just a bit crazy, and that was the aura again of the man. And he has this special bond with the Everton fans, and they were delighted to see him back.
Once you get into the city, once you start meeting the fans, how special it is. It's a family club, we're all close, aren't we? It's not a big area. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience for myself, and it still is.
He was a great big game player, great character about the dressing room and that. Everyone sort of loved him, you know what I mean? He was always that smile on his face.
He was one of the nicest guys to deal with, to talk to be with. Yeah, he was brilliant. Totally different to when he used to step over the line on a Saturday afternoon.
Been a long love affair. I played for the club, captained the club, managed to pick up a trophy and managed the club. Incredible 30 years or so amazing. And the biggest thing for me is being part of the community, and part with the fans. The fans have been incredible with me. They showed me incredible respect, both sides, the whole city. And I can't thank them enough for that. You know, they're special to me. They know that. It's not just words. I love them, and I'll always love them.
Sky Mobile sponsors the transfer window on Sky Sports News.